Hope's objectives for this speech, for Project 6, vocal variety, will be to use volume, pitch, rate, and quality to reflect and add interest to the message. Hope spent most of her career as a dialogue producer for video games. In this role, she learned great writing, acting, and directing helps to develop a deep connection between the player and their character. There are 4 primary types of dialogue used to communicate in action-adventure games. Story-driven dialogue helps to develop the character and progress the story. The other 3 types Hope will speak about today in her speech titled, How Communication is Used to Connect Players to Their Characters in Action-Adventure Video Games.
Okay, now do it again. This time, you're being slapped in the face, punched in the gut, and kicked painfully in the groin. Now that is an example of a grunt dialogue recording session. One of the hardest recording sessions an actor will face on the project in a video game. The reason why is it's 2 to 4 hours of breath work. It's strenuous on the throat and very fatiguing on the body. It'll take an actor a day or 2 to recover from a grunt dialogue recording session. But we need this amount of grunts because games are 10 to 15 hours in length, and 20 to 30% of the gameplay is combat. And how do we get the players to feel like they're really playing the game and that it's real? We do that with the grunts. We bring the characters to life in combat through grunts. Also, games are problem solving. You're solving one puzzle after another puzzle after another puzzle. Puzzles you don't solve on your first try. You solve the puzzles with repetition. Because of this, we need a lot of grunts, and they need to sound different, and they need to be varied in order to make the experience, the replay experience, feel different. Have you ever heard or had a dripping faucet that drips, drips, drips insistently, and you try to block it out, but it's the only thing you can think about, and it's so distracting? Well, that's what grunts are if you have the same grunt that plays over and over in the game. Or if you have the same line of dialogue that plays over and over in the game. It takes you out of the gameplay, and you're thinking about the line. All of a sudden, players are no longer in it to win it. Another form of dialogue that we record, another type of dialogue that we record in video games is gameplay dialogue. Gameplay dialogue is objective-based dialogue. It helps to progress the player through the game. We'll give you cues on what you need to do to accomplish the level, to finish the level. Do this to accomplish that. Now, we also give clues. If a player is having trouble solving puzzles, we'll give them a little clue on how to solve the puzzle. We're not going to tell them the whole thing, but we'll give a little clue. So an example of objective-based dialogue is, there's 2 enemies ahead, and the player has to take those 2 enemies out in order to proceed to the next level. Now, when you're playing a game and you're repeating the level over and over, players are going to play differently each time. And we need the dialogue to play differently each time, so we need variation. Different than grunts, we need variation. We need a range of dialogue, lines that mean the same thing, but the words are different. There's 2 enemies over there. Do you take the right one? I'll take the left. Right there, 2 enemies. You right, me left. Same line, means the same thing, but different words. But we also need a range of dialogue, where you have low lines, quiet lines, mid lines, and then really projected lines. For example, same level, the players play differently. And now all of a sudden they step into an enemy zone. Enemies are all around, but the enemies haven't noticed the players. And you have to be really careful. You have to be careful with the way you move. You need to be careful with what you say. And you need to be careful with how you say it. There's 2 enemies over there. You take the right, I'll take the left. I've covered my ear because that's a radio. So what we do is we process. We record the dialogues quietly in stealth mode. and then we process the dialogue in radio processing so that the other player can hear, but we don't distract the enemies. But one of the players obviously will always make a mistake. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 explosions are going off. Guns everywhere. People are yelling, screaming, and now that same line of dialogue needs to project, and you need to hear, there's 2 enemies over there. You take the right, I'll take the left. And this is all recorded. We record all these different ranges of dialogue, and we tie it into the game based on the situation and the context of what's going on in the game. This creates a synergy and a connection between the environment, the context of the environment, and the player. And it connects the player, and the character, sorry, and it connects the character to the player, creating a deeper belief in you, the player, being the character, if that makes sense. What am I saying, Matt?
It has to be new for every single person who's playing the game.
What am I saying right now?
You're saying, I'm a little bit perturbed in you, buddy, so watch yourself.
Got it. I didn't say a word, and he read my body language. 70 studies show that 70% of communication is nonverbal communication. And so another form of communication that we record in the game to connect the player to the character is nonverbal communication. We record the body and the body movements. And so another variation that we get on that line is, so you need to be expressive. The body movement needs to be exaggerated a little bit. So normally the hit would be like this in real life. It's actually because we lose data, and it needs to translate into the game. So to say that line again, stop. Look, 2 enemies. You take the right, I'll take the left. So in games, our #1 objective developing video games is to create an immersed experience that delights the players, to get new players to buy consoles. And what we do with Dialog is we get a lot of variation, and we tie that variation into the context of the game, so that every time they replay a level, it's always different. So that it doesn't sound like a drip. It's always different. It keeps them immersed in the game, and they're loving it. Thank you.